From an audio perspective, if people realize it's AI, they're done. Your content actually becomes indistinguishable when you use AI. I say expose your weird, expose your edges, and you will find your people.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode here of the Kinetyca GTM podcast. Today we have an interesting topic because we will discuss podcasting itself. And we have invited Allison Hare. She's an expert in podcasting. And it's of course a bit different because normally we discuss like modern go-to-market here, right? So all the new technologies, setups, and new ways how to approach potential clients in your business, right? Everything around Claude, N8N, etc. But let's see how we can actually enhance and how podcasting or like, let's say, the more traditional ways also can really bring something new into the mix of the approach to our clients. So, hi, Allison. How are you doing?
Hey, it's great to be here, David. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time and joining us here in this episode. And yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because what we normally discuss here on this podcast is like the most modern, innovative kind of go-to-market approaches, right? Everything that has to do with Claude, with Clay, N8N, etc., etc. And podcasting is in a way an approach that is a little bit, let's say, older in a way, right? A little bit more conservative, but it is changing quite a lot, right? And I think it's also like it's becoming much more popular these days again. Obviously, for a reason, like we decided also to make a podcast here at Kinetyca. So would love to hear insights. First of all, how is it for you to listen to so many podcasts and to be at so many podcasts?
It's so funny because I do a lot of podcast audits. So I listen to podcasts for fun, like I love it, and I listen to it for work. And I was trying to figure out, is there some kind of metric to like measure how much audio time is spent listening to podcasts? It's a lot. It's a lot, but I think I'm an auditory learner and I just enjoy it so much. There is something about, and these are back from like the old radio days, is like theater of the mind. And so when you can capture people from an audio perspective and then adding video on top of it, just adds to a whole different experience. And, even with a level of AI, there's so much available now to even enhance it and make it even better.
Yeah, for sure. I can just imagine. And actually, you told me already that there's some interesting things happening on the AI front, right? You told me that right now the biggest amount of podcasts these days is created with AI, right?
That's correct. It's 52% of
Crazy.
new podcasts being released are all AI generated. That doesn't mean they're good. They're not.
Yeah.
They're pretty bad, actually. But there is a huge level of content that's being dumped out into the podcast universe.
So weird because everything is AI generated right now, but I was really surprised when you told me, this 52% actually in the podcast space, because you would think that at least like when I'm actually watching a person and actually like observing like a real conversation, I would really care about that it's real, right? That I'm actually really seeing real people, right? And so do you think that people know that they are AI generated when they watch them, or do you think it's like completely, like camouflaged?
Do you want to hear some crazy statistics on this? There are actually studies done. From an audio perspective, if people realize it's AI, they're done. And so I think in some cases, we're still early in the AI, and I don't think we're too far from it being where it's going to be indetectable, but I think it's detectable from an audio perspective where maybe some of the inflection is wrong if somebody talks about somebody's brother's suicide and they're like, okay, you know what I mean? The response isn't really matching the tone of it. And I think that will get fine-tuned for now. So I think it's easier, and I think people really hate it. From a video perspective, people are more likely to not be bothered by the AI piece of it because they're used to consuming things. So even if it is AI generated memes, things that are funny, things that are interesting, things that are entertaining, they're far more likely to consume video podcasts that are AI and not be bothered by it. Who knows? That'll change. All this is changing at the speed of light, but isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's really crazy. I wouldn't have thought this for sure. And I mean, the detecting thing, it's a really interesting part. This is something that we deal with also like on a day-to-day basis, right? So when we do go-to-market motions, we do them like on the outbound side, on the content, and on the ad side. And the one that people are most interested in is it's the outbound side, right? So outbound means basically approaching potential leads via email and LinkedIn. And of course, we use a lot of AI here. But at the same time, when you create these messages, you have to really, really do it very well so that the person doesn't realize it and does it feel real at the same time. And that's the thing, right? When the person realizes, and even if it's like a very well-crafted message and the person realizes, well, this was just AI, then they really lose interest. And the thing is, what I'm realizing by myself and also like with many other people that I'm talking about this is we are getting more perceptive to this as well, right? So like at the beginning, I guess when somebody would see the AI generated message these days and show it to a person like, let's say 2 years back, they might not even be able to realize it, right? But I mean, the most obvious one is the M dashes, right? You have these dashes
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah, the dashes that really show this, but then also like it's the phrasing, it's the words that are used,
Yeah,
it's the
it's
way
not
how it
about X, it's about
articulates.
Y. And then they'll do like the statement stacking.
Yes, exactly. It's so funny that you really see this more. So I wonder when it really comes, because we always think, okay, we are not able to see this, but AI is getting better, but we also spot it better, right? So
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think there will be a time where it's really impossible?
I think it's inevitable that it's going to be harder to detect, but I think now we're a little bit savvy. What I've noticed, at least from being in the coaching and consulting space, there is a trust recession. And I think that's across the board
Yeah.
where you're not sure if it's AI, you're not sure if the person is who they say they're going to be. It's easy, even regardless of AI. There are a lot of people out there that maybe overpromise and underdeliver, right? And so if you're going to part with your money or your time or your energy somewhere, I think people are a lot more skeptical than they are, and it's a little bit harder in some ways to build trust and credibility. I think from a podcast perspective, that is the value of a podcast, is that you can build trust and credibility through visibility of it because you're a human and
Yeah.
people really see that. If you are delivering a keynote or writing a LinkedIn post or even have a book, every word is labored over and you can see that. But from an audio medium, if you are doing it live, you can have it enhanced by AI or have AI help you on the back end. But I think there's actually more of a romanticism around real life human engagement, and it becomes refreshing. So I don't know where it's going to go. You probably, David, would have a lot better insight into what's coming around the corner of those things being undetectable. But I don't know. Overall, I feel optimistic about AI in general. There has been a lot of fear mongering around AI is going to take all the jobs, and we have not seen. Certainly, it has disrupted a lot, but it hasn't decimated the workforce as they thought it would. And I think there has to be some type of balance. And I wonder, even from your business, am I right about my instincts, or is there something else that is coming around the corner that could be more interesting?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that there are two interesting points that you made here. So one about the trust part, and of course at the end humans buy from humans, right? So this will always be the case. And the thing is that with podcast, the really nice thing is that you can actually like really see and feel the person in a better way. And at the end, like when you look at the whole buyer journey, people go through different steps, right? Like they analyze their website, they look at their LinkedIn, they look at the different offers, they look at the competitors, right? And so the more we give the person like to look at beforehand or while we are with them in the process, the easier we make it for them, right? So I think here a podcast really, really can help a lot. That's for sure. Now, the other part that you mentioned is if we see that it is actually right now decimating like the amount of people that we need, let's say, for the work that we do. In our case, like when it comes to the go-to-market space, I remember like a few years back when we have done this, everybody was saying, you will not need any SDRs anymore, right? No sales representatives, because who will write these messages? It will just be AI. You also don't need people that make phone calls. It will just be AI. And then in the end, what happened is, yes, you need in a way less people, I would say, than you did need like a few years back. But you still very much need them, and actually they just have to be skilled in exactly these areas. And at the same time, also like new jobs are being created, right?
Yes. Yeah, it shifted the marketplace.
Yes, 100%. Like in our case, it's like the GTM engineer or GTM strategist that we have seen that are new ones. Are there some jobs that you have seen that have been created newly?
I don't know. I don't know that I would have my finger on the pulse of that, of the job market. I don't know that's really my lane to know much about. I do think that when it comes, at least from my own perspective, you know what I have seen, and there's actually been a lot of data supporting this as well, is that the how-to books, like the content courses, those have dropped off a cliff because you can just go to AI and ask, hey, build me a website or build me a business that Alex Hormozy would create. And it can do it for you instantly. And so there is a lot of disruption around it. I do find that I had a conversation with a fellow coach yesterday about this where we're like, where is the new frontier? And I think it is being in person. I think people are craving that in-person connection. AI has been so helpful in so many different ways and certainly has some really profound risks as well that we're all trying to figure out and navigate what that can look like from a public perspective and also from a personal perspective too. But yeah, I think there is, even from the podcast space, where I have seen a lot of energy go to are in-person experiences. So instead of just a one-way kind of broadcast of a podcast, here's the information, good luck, right? People want more of an interactive experience. They want to be engaged in something, and that can be in person, it can be digital, it can be virtual, but people want to be actively engaged. They don't want everything to be outsourced. And again, with the loneliness epidemic, it is very real. There are even loneliness TikTokers. It's like a lifestyle. Have you heard of this, David?
No,
I heard about this morning. So there's like a whole thing on TikTok of like loneliness influencers. Loneliness influencers, like people are.
What does it mean? Like a group therapy kind of thing, or how can I imagine
it
that?
is like celebrating I'm alone.
Oh,
And they
wow.
follow each other. They're at home with their face mask on, watching whatever, but they are lonely. They don't have friends. And there's a whole network of people that are glomming onto that as an influencer. Isn't that wild? I just heard about it this morning.
Yeah, it's really right. But it's very ironic as well because it
Right?
contradicts itself in a way, right?
Yes.
If you want to be lonely, then you want to be lonely. If you don't want to be lonely, then you share with others and try to connect. But if
Yeah.
you do it both at the same time, it's a bit weird in a way.
Be lonely together, apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting how things change these days. Since you do podcasts so much, right, and talk so much with people, what is the most interesting thing that you've talked about lately, would you say?
Interesting on my podcast or with other podcasters?
That you just heard people talk about on your podcast.
I think on my podcast, so I have a podcast that is spicy, actually. It is where I like to throw gasoline on fiery topics like power, politics, religion, relationships. And
I see.
part of, and you'll notice even in our conversation that I have all these cultural references of what's going on. And that's how my brain operates. I really love that. And so I like to thoughtfully deconstruct it. So I've had a lot of weird and really out there, I don't know if out there is a good way to put it, but some really remarkable stories, some remarkable people on my podcast. I've had people talking about, I love the trad wife phenomenon. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Happened to be
Yeah,
really,
I've seen it on Instagram, yeah.
yeah, I happen to be really fascinated by cults. And so I have a lot of cult survivors on my show. And it's really interesting. And I think it ties back to this loneliness thing, because I think there is always this undercurrent of what it means to belong. It's such a human experience to feel like you belong, whether it's to a company, whether it's to a family, whether it's to a group of people, whether it is to entrepreneurs, to yourself, even to belong to yourself and not be owned by anybody else. And I think that kind of concept, and even the podcast itself, the question has always been, there's so much that's going on. out in the world that can be terrifying and thrilling. And I think we have gotten to a point where you can't put your head in the sand. And so typically people who are listening to my show are people that want to make a positive impact. And what does it mean to be a force for good? And so in my world, I think about how do you use your voice as a force for good. And so in my world, that is through podcasts or even writing, through ways of contribution of how do you not contribute to the noise or the frustration, but feel like you have agency. And the reason the podcast isn't necessarily political nature, but it was born of political frustration of figuring out how do we, I think when I had started I started it 7 years ago. And at the time I was going through a lot of personal change. There was a lot of political unrest in the US. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And there was so much going on that I remember thinking, if people learned what I was learning in real time, what could we do together to change it or to make a positive impact? And so through the years, I've interviewed people like Seth Godin and Jesse Itzler and Mariel Hemingway. And if you know who they are, they're big deals in their own circles. But they're all people who are gone against the status quo and figured out a new way that would work better. And I'm always very interested in the human experience and how do we make a more positive contribution. I think from a technology perspective, I think the AI aspect of it is very interesting. And obviously, I don't think we've seen this kind of change since the iPhone and even Y2K and even the .com kind of boom since 2000. And this is world changing. And so I'm trying to stay abreast as much as I can to see how do we navigate this new world, but how do we be part of it, not just be caught in the tide of it. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Yeah, it does. Definitely. Very interesting topics, actually, that you talk about there. The question of belonging, definitely in the way which is the world which is so interconnected, and with AI and all the fakeness, let's say, out there, even a topic that becomes more and more important. How do you answer this for yourself? The belonging part. Have you found this through the podcasting in a way, or is it more like a channel for you to talk about it?
That is such a smart question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, so thank you for that.
Really?
I do think the podcast is a channel of expression and of belonging. I actually, just to be perfectly honest with you, I feel like I have such deep conversations all the time on the podcast. And what I am missing is lightness and fun and laughter. Yeah. It's not that it's missing. It just needs more balance. And I think even from the belonging side of things, I think I wanted to create a place to belong for people that identified with it. I think when I was working in the corporate world, I had a lot of corporate overlords. And so I was very careful to keep things very neutral. And I'm not here trying to be out on offense. I'm not Andrew Tate. I'm not trying to be offensive to everybody, but really have thoughtful conversations around it. But I personally feel like when you hug the middle, your content becomes forgettable. And even being out on my own, it has been a journey of how to show your edges, because the edges are where people find you and where you do find belonging. And instead of, I think years ago, I would worry about, how do I say this for people that don't agree with me? How do I say this in a way where I don't offend them, but at least open the door for them? And that was totally the wrong approach. The right approach was, how do I be a lighthouse for those people that realize they are not alone? How do I shine a light for people that are like, oh, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, but I'm willing to consider or have a conversation about it. And that was a huge distinction for me of the concept of belonging, or at least using the podcast as a place that is a destination to belong. And even all of my clients, so I'm a podcast strategist, is where I help founders and thought leaders launch and grow podcasts that matter in the world and are integrated with their business. And it's been a journey not only for me, but also helping others really find their voice. Because when you are, even if it is a podcast or on LinkedIn or whatever channel it is, even if it's Facebook, if you're sharing memes or things that make you laugh, whatever, it's really natural to mimic what you see out there. So if you're into Stephen Bartlett and Diary of a CEO, or Mel Robbins, or Jay Shetty, or Lewis Howes, or Tony Robbins, it's natural to try and emulate what you see out there. And so much of my time is really spent helping people and welcoming them back home to themselves, because there's been so much conditioning over how you're supposed to sound. But your voice is always going to be the best connector, in your opinion, in the way, not opinion again to offend, but your edges that you've probably smoothed over in other areas so you can be pleasing and in all arenas. But how do you find your people? And so that, it sounds like a very meta way to explain the concept of belonging. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Love it. Love it. It's super interesting. I mean, so a few points actually that really resonate with me is the one about finding your edges and embracing your edges as well, right? Because the thing is that,
AI is reductive. AI is reductive for what's out there.
Exactly.
Exactly. Embracing your edges are everything.
Yeah, I think it was McConaughey, I think, like the actor that just said the problem with it. Yes, exactly. Matthew McConaughey that said the problem with AI and the reason why it doesn't really work on the creative space completely, and why he doesn't believe that it will be able to let's say create movies like end to end completely, because the problem is that it always goes to the middle, right? It doesn't exactly do what you're talking about, right? It doesn't go to the edges, it doesn't explore new areas, and it also therefore blends in, right? So this is 100%. And it's, I mean, yes, when we look at other people there in content, like I think it's like a natural thing, especially if when you start with it, to emulate in a way, but then you have to find your own voice, and you like people, of course, like people want to see this and want, because I mean, if you're just as anyone else, if you're just a copy, then what's the point, right? And people cannot even picture you, they cannot even color you in a way, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And
your content actually becomes indistinguishable when you use AI. So you can put what you can talk, and like a lot of people have convinced themselves that my Claude knows me, it knows how I talk, and it still does not, because you can put anybody's name on it and it's interchangeable at the end of the day, because it is reductive. And that, I think, is the danger.
Yes, for sure. And so tell me, okay, so you go with your clients with this journey of finding your own voice, right?
Yeah.
And finding your own edge. How do you do this? How do you go through this journey?
It's so fun to do this work. Usually when I work with somebody and they're stuck in a way that often looks like, I'm really good at this, and I could talk about this forever. I could do it with my eyes closed, but I'm really passionate about this. This is what I really want to talk about, but it's not going to make me money like this one will. And people get stuck in between that of, what do I talk about when I am multidimensional? What do I care about? I want to make money, and I want to also talk about the thing that I need. And one of the things that I am really proud of that happens 100% of the time with every single client I've worked with, that when they get stuck, they need to talk. And what I mean by that is usually, and it can be easy to use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever AI, give me all the ideas. And it's great for ideation, but at some point you have to step away. And I think in the human engagement of being asked the right questions and allowing yourself to talk, because you always have the answer to get you unstuck. It's not me. It's just giving you the space and the right questions to ask. and then it always comes out every single time. And that part is really powerful because for things that we are good at and that we like the way our brain thinks, we don't realize it's just how your brain thinks, right? You don't realize it might be remarkable or it might be something that's going to resonate with somebody else, something that is shaped just by the way you talk. And so I find that often people aren't given enough time to talk, that they are taken down more of a formulaic path. But if they're given the right questions or asked the right questions and given the space to talk, they always find the right thing. So I know it for a podcast like this, it's probably better to be more prescriptive with it. But I would say that if you're ever stuck in any of those, find a coach that is going to help you see the answer through your lens of the world, but having their objective perspective to help you figure out what that is.
It sounds like really like a self-discovery process in a way, right?
It really is. And I think it is also as simple as, is there a yes feeling in your body or is there a no feeling in your body? And I know this when I was working in the corporate world and I would be in meetings all day. And so I worked for high tech. I worked in high tech sales for 20 plus years. And towards the end, I realized that I didn't really belong there. I could do it. I'm good at sales. I'm good at all of that stuff, but it just didn't feel right anymore. And I would look at the clock and I'd be like, all right, it's 9:38. I've got 22 minutes left. All right, I got to get through this. I got to put the game face on. I had the mask on and it felt very constrictive.
You still persevered 20 years, you say?
20 years. It wasn't so bad in the beginning, but towards the end, when I realized it was at the end of it, it became obvious. Like I would be on this mic and I would do a podcast episode and I would feel expansive and I'd be like, this is what I'm supposed to do. How do I make this my thing? And so it was that yes feeling, that no feeling in my body. And I think part of it is like, I always tell my clients, like, hey, I have really strong opinions, but I want you to always default to what feels right for you. I want you to have the space that it's got to feel right for you. And so far it's worked. I don't know how, but I have a good mix of men and women, but so far it's worked.
Great. That's great. Really nice to hear how you found this. I'm sure many people out there are struggling exactly in this kind of situation, right? Where they're like stuck in doing something which they don't really believe in, and then they don't know, okay, how do I actually get out of this? And yeah, cool. So tell me, let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics here, actually. So one thing that would be interesting for me to understand better is how do you choose the right guests? Because that's obviously an important part, right? You can think about, okay, how do I have the lighting, the editing, the setup, how do I talk, the topics, all the stuff. But then obviously it really very much depends on the guest that I talk with, right? So what's your, I don't know, your mechanism, your system there, your idea?
Can we use you as an example?
Sure.
Tell me about who are the right guests for this show.
Yeah, so in my case, I mean, this podcast is pretty new, right? But so in our case, we work in the go-to-market space, right? So we look for people that are somehow in the sales and marketing, that are experts in sales and marketing, but specifically when it comes to the most modern ways of doing sales and marketing, specifically these go-to-market motions. It used to be in the past, specifically on clay, right? Like the specific on clay, but now it's shifted very much. There are so many different tools and technologies and setups. It has become more like a sales AI kind of a thing. And so the people that we so far looked for were like people that, you know, like decision makers, let's say, in SaaS companies or companies that know a little bit more about the space, or like experts in a specific area, like you, right? You are an expert in the podcast space. But then one thing that I also realized is, I mean, it's not just enough that the person is an expert there, but obviously they have to know how to speak well, how to be in front of a camera, how to be likable in a way, I think, in front of the camera, right? And I think this is very different. Some people are, some people are not. Sure. I mean, yeah, these are like a few thoughts that come to my mind or that I've learned, but yeah, I'm just at the beginning, as I say. Yeah,
it depends on the type of show. So I always ask, what purpose does the podcast serve for you as the creator? And you can interchange podcasts with any platform. If you're writing a Substack, if you're writing a newsletter, if you're on LinkedIn, if you are a keynote speaker, you can exchange that for anything. If you're writing a book, building a course, whatever those things are. So what purpose does the podcast serve for you as the creator? And it usually falls into 4 categories. It doesn't mean that they are one or the other. It's just who's in the driver's seat. And one is trust and credibility and visibility. And so I predominantly work with founders. And so these are people that their podcast is an extension of their business to some degree. But there usually is, I work with mission-driven leaders. So there's usually a big purpose underneath it, not always just, hey, I need to make more money. There is a mission, there is a thought change, thought leadership that is integrated into it. So trust and credibility and visibility are important. That's one. The second one is a high value networking tool. So in your case, you might think about, who are my dream clients? Invite the CEO on to have a meaningful discussion, or even vendors or partners or clients that you've got is one aspect. The other thing is, you might read a book that blows you away, let's say on the cutting edge of AI, or something that is showing what is the future, and invite the author on to have a meaningful discussion on it. The podcast, or at least that platform, when it is a one-to-many platform, it opens doors like you would not believe, that you wouldn't have otherwise. If you're like, hey, can you get on a Zoom? It's like, all right, but there's more in it for them because they get to expand and multiply their reach as well as yours. The third one is a lead generator. And so some people will structure their podcast, again, a podcast is structured very differently for trust and credibility in the driver's seat versus lead generator. And then some people are a place to share your stories. And so it really is dependent on who is in the driver's seat, who is the ideal listener, what is going to be the most valuable to them. I always say, when it comes to having guests on, especially as a beginning podcaster, start with people that you think are easy to get to, right? They are in your network. They are experts. You don't want just anybody, right? You want somebody that is going to be relevant to your topic, is going to have a meaningful discussion. I've had a client many years ago. She had a podcast called 6 Feet Above, and she is 6 feet tall. And she spent 16 years of her life wishing she was 6 feet under, wishing she could end her life. And so she would invite people on her podcast that had these really remarkable stories. Thankfully, she is doing great today, but use this podcast as a way to share meaningful stories. For her, it was not a business platform. It was a place to share stories. And for guests, a lot of her guests had never shared those stories before. And they weren't necessarily have the camera and the lighting set up and weren't used to it. So she would always do a pre-call for them, which would make sense, right? They are meaningful stories. They don't have to be the biggest people in the world. But I always recommend make a list of 10. And that one is who is easy to get and then increasingly harder, right? And then your 10 might be your dream guest. I would not start with Oprah. You don't want to cut your teeth on Oprah Winfrey. But what happens is, as you get guests that are bigger and bigger, you say, I've had Seth Godin on my podcast. I've had Mariel Hemingway. And they're like, yeah, I want to be on. You can use that as leverage. So that was probably a really long way to answer your question. But there are a lot of factors that are included. But again, you always want to be thinking about the audience, of what is going to be the biggest advantage and value for your ideal listener. And also, I think it's important, if you do have a business podcast, that you're also establishing yourself as an expert in your field as well. And there are ways to structure the show accordingly.
Yeah. Really interesting. The last question that I would have to you is, so we talked right now a lot about the different podcast types, the people that I can invite, how podcasts have changed, and also the role of AI, right? And so one thing that we always try to ask at the end of the podcast is, how do you see go-to-market, and specifically in your case, the podcast right now evolving? Do you see something when it comes to this year or the next years where you think, oh, this is like the new frontier. This is right now
Yeah.
how things are going. And what is it then?
I think podcasting, believe it or not, it's been around for 20 plus years. I think it's still in its infancy. And I think AI is cracking the doors wide open on it. I think people are listening more. Podcast won the US election in 2024. They are so consequential now. Advertisers and sponsors are spending way more money on podcasting than they are in the other mediums as well. And then listenership has gone up tremendously. So I think it's something like 65% of people listen to podcasts or listen to at least one podcast. So there's a lot there. I think what I had mentioned before is the in-person, the interactive, the engaging way. I think there are creative ways to podcast now. And I think because of AI, it has allowed podcasting to proliferate. And there are really 7 ways to make money podcasting. And one of them, and one of the more recent ones, is licensing deals. So you'll see podcasting now being included in Netflix and SiriusXM and branded deals, certainly Spotify early on with that. But you're going to start to see podcasting everywhere. And I think even the video side of things too, there is a lot of focus on video. The great thing about video is that YouTube is a search engine. It is a full search engine. So if you package it properly, it's easier to grow. You can have not a great show and still grow. If you package it well, you can have an incredible show and package it well and skyrocket. But all of those things, video, audio, podcasting, they're all a bit of a long game too. That's just where we see the direction heading.
Yeah. So the future will be just more and more podcasts, more real. The people want to go back to get the real interaction, the real contact, right?
Yeah, and I also think there is a need and a desire for micro influencers. You think about the big names like Stephen Bartlett and Tony Robbins, and who, insert any Ed Milet, Lewis Howe, any of those people, Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, the people that have been around forever. Yes, they are the standard of what people think about when podcasting, but I think people are finding their niches. And I think that having an angle and having your point of view and the edges exposed are what allow you to truly build a community and build an opportunity to have these kind of influential corners of the internet that you can own. And that the more, again, the less reductive your podcast and your content is, and the more it is your voice, the more your people will find you. And it may not be the biggest audience in the entire world, but it's going to be a loyal, committed audience. There was, years ago, I went to a podcast conference and there was a woman there. She lived in Virginia and she was obsessed with UK game shows from the United Kingdom. She lived in the US. She loved it so much, she created a podcast about it. Was this podcast huge? Of course it wasn't. But did she have a rabid, loyal following? She sure did. That's what people want. People want to see themselves. And so I say, expose your weird, expose your edges, say the thing, be kind, and you will find your people. And as long as you promote it or out there, you make it easy to find you. And then you can make it easy for them to stay and then share on your behalf.
Fantastic. Allison, thank you very much. This was super insightful to learn about, your expertise that you have in the podcast space and everything we could learn from that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And for the listeners out there, if you are interested to learn more about GTM, about go-to-market strategies, then tune into the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye.